Light number 51. We are here today with Stacy Schaffer. You'll have to give all the letters behind your name.
MALPC.
Oh, that wasn't nearly as many as I thought. I just remember, well, my husband has this long string and I literally keep forgetting how many degrees he actually has. Bachelor's, obviously, master's, MBA, PhD. I don't know if he's got a couple masters, but so welcome. You are a child therapist.
Yes.
Is that different from being a child psychologist, or is it the same thing?
Usually psychologists, like they specialize in testing.
Okay.
And like do a lot of with like ADHD diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So we're adjacent to each other.
Okay. So you kind of work together.
Well, so I am like the word counselor and therapist interchange with each other. And like if a the parent says, I suspect there's like ADHD, then we would refer them to a psychologist who that's their main job is to do the testing and the screening for that.
Okay. So give my audience a little bit of background on yourself and then on your book.
Yeah. Well, I live in Arvada, Colorado, which is like outside of Denver. And I am in private practice as a child, adolescent, and young adult therapist. And it's approaching 20 years that I've been a clinician in private practice. So I specialize in grief and anxiety, but I see like a gamut of issues. And I wrote this book with love from a children's therapist, # lessons I've learned along the way. It came out in April. And I did my own audiobook, and that came out in May. And it is part a culmination of what I've seen on the other side of the couch for the approaching 20 years as a clinician, and my thoughts and insight on what I'm seeing. And then it's combined with extracting wisdom from a pretty traumatic childhood to hopefully transmute into something useful in the world.
Okay. Now, the reading you first sent me, it sounds like you're going to read something different, because the reading you sent me kind of talked about how your mother never hugged you, never touched you.
It's the same thing. It's
the same reading.
She it's called #teeth, and the subtitle is Family Values, because my mom was a dental hygienist. She died in 2001, a really long time ago. But the excerpt is basically about the highest value was teeth. Like, we didn't do the nurturing. We cared about teeth. And at the end of the day, like, let's look at how much that matters. And so the chapter is about focusing on the wrong things.
Okay. Now, first of all, the reason I misunderstood was because I thought you were saying the chapter was about TEA. And I'm like, that's not what I remember reading.
No, there's no T in there. Sometimes I don't articulate. Teeth.
Right. So you talk about your mom being very obsessed with this, and do you kind of get into why parents can be the way they are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really big on taking care of unhealed trauma. We talk all the time about kids are resilient, but what are the people in counseling as adults talking about? Typically their childhood. And so my desire is that we give kids more skills along the way, so they don't just have to survive to get there, that they're more equipped, because it's going to be hard enough anyway, because life. And so that I think that sometimes when we are focused on, like, say, just a child's grades, but we're ignoring their mental health, why it doesn't matter at the end of the day if you don't have a functioning child.
Right. And I'm curious how much you think that has changed over the years, or is it very individual to the family?
I think that there have been moves in the right direction for sure. Because, back when I was a kid, like, mental health support was not as readily available. It just wasn't. It wasn't like
I
the
think it
first
was
thing.
almost non-existent when I was
Yeah,
a kid.
yeah. Like it was just it was not an option that people like chose, or like that their friends were like, hey, you should, maybe I know this person. And so I think that the moves have been amazing in the right direction for mental health,
Mhm.
especially youth mental health, that we're like, oh, maybe kids need support too. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so I think it's been great.
And where part of the reason I find this interesting, especially after reading what you sent me, is, oh my gosh, I could see my own childhood in that. And for us, it wasn't teeth. For us, it was grades. And I've often joked that the very minute I was born, my dad held me up and said, "You're going to college and you're paying for it yourself."
Yeah, good luck.
Right, right. Well, actually, I did go to college and I did pay for it myself,
Thank you
but
very much.
however, I saw the same sort of focus, okay, on intelligence and grades was one thing. And then at a certain stage, my mom became very obsessed with she was going to keep the house neat and clean. Well, that sounds like a good thing, but as you were describing in your reading, it gets to the point where nothing else matters. And her intentions were good. She was like, I want to give my family a nice, clean, calm environment. But it ended up not being that, where nothing could be out of place
Mhm.
without the frustration. And I suppose part of what I wonder, as the whole field of mental health changes and society's views change, I think that in a prior age, let's say the 1800s, people were just expected to be strong and move on. We don't have that expectation in the same way. And I see pros and cons to that. I'm interested in your input on that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's interesting when you say like what your mom was focused on and your dad was focused on. Because when I was writing that chapter, I was
Hmm.
like kind of interviewing friends and be like, what was like a family value above all else, And I
Hmm.
wrote a little bit about that too. And friends were like keeping the family like but seemingly perfect, or
Hmm.
those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, our ancestors were like trying to survive and not get eaten by wolves, and so they didn't have the
Right.
luxury of mental health support. I mean, and mental health support, sadly, is still a luxury. Like,
Hmm.
that it's that there are families that are like, we have to keep food on the table, and so we don't, it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're like,
Yes.
we're trying,
Hmm.
we can't talk conflict resolution, we're hungry, and
Yes.
so I think that we have gotten to a place where we're like, well, actually, mental health like needs to be closer to physical health,
Hmm.
in terms of those needs, and our kids, like the stigma is getting removed, which is saving lives. I feel like it's
Hmm.
absolutely saving lives. That there's active movement towards like replacing that stigma with like, actually, it's important to be proactive.
Uh-huh. Yeah. One thing that concerns me, and I'm not saying this in a confrontational way at all. I do think there's definitely a time for counseling, and I've been to one when I was going through a really rough patch in my life. But I do know people, I was on a certain forum, a very interesting forum, where people were in therapy for 10, 15, 20 years. It was just kind of a lifestyle. And I do know people who've been in therapy for something like 12 years. And is that going overboard, or do you think that some people need therapy that long?
I think like it's definitely person specific. Like
Hmm.
I would worry if someone saw me that long, that there was a dependence that was
Hmm.
created, that made them feel like if something happens to me that they're not going to be functional. So
Uh-huh.
there's beauty in the therapeutic relationship, right? Like
Hmm.
that's where, they say that the healing happens, and like having another person like reflect your
Right.
goodness. But I think it could potentially lead to accept that feels like a really long time. I'm a fan of making sure that I'm still available, like because I've been around so long.
Mhm.
I like there's a client I'm thinking of that I've seen in bursts over the years, like middle school,
Uh-huh.
high school. And then, you know, we're like feeling on more solid ground. And then I'm like, well, you know where to find me. And
Right.
so I'm more of a fan of that kind of approach. But
Mhm.
it is super person specific, but it's not the way I operate.
Right. Well, I did really appreciate this counselor that I briefly saw. As I said, there were a lot of things coming at me from all sides at the time. And I appreciated that I had all these voices telling me I was crazy and I was wrong. I was being gaslit a lot and kind of being made the scapegoat for a group of people. And it was very helpful to me to be able to say, here's what's happening. You know, am I the one in the wrong? I will do whatever I can to fix it. And to get the feedback, no, and here's some things to know about certain dynamics among certain groups, et cetera, and so forth. And after 6 months, she said, you know, you don't need my help. And at the time I was a little bit like,
You're like, yes, I do. Yes, I do.
but in retrospect, I thought that that was highly ethical and professional of her, instead of saying, hey, here's someone who will stick with me for a year or two and I can keep making money. So now I got the impression from reading the blurb in your book, on your book, that it's a little bit of memoir.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been saying that like that it's part memoir, part like parenting support, part inner child healing guide. That I'm like it's for anyone who was ever 11 or loves someone who's 11. That there's stuff in there that I'm like you know it was
How many people does that rule out?
just saying. Yeah, like I'm like everyone had to go to middle school. And so I have been saying like I think lots of people have reported to me that they can find themselves at some point in my story
Yep.
because my in my intro I go over kind of the outline of said childhood, but said childhood was not great. And I've
Hmm.
only been talking about it for the past decade about my
Hmm.
childhood. And so I'm like, oh, well, there when I did my healing work, you know, that
Hmm.
like I always say, we want to speak from our scars, not our open wounds. When I
Hmm.
was able to speak about it, I'm like, there's nuggets I'm gonna transmute that. I'm gonna take that.
Yep. Yep. Do you find that most people do wait decades to start talking about these things? And how does it help them when they do?
I mean, I think so. For my friends who are therapists for adults,
Hmm.
that's the feedback I get a lot from kind of their caseload is that they're like, yeah, like I'm seeing this person and something came up that triggered when they were 7. And so that like
Hmm.
that seems to be pretty common because it's hard work to like be vulnerable and you know, kind of to show up to find one that's like in your insurance network, you know, like
Hmm.
it's a lot of work. And so oftentimes people don't go into counseling unless something feels like unbearable and it feels like they have no
Uh-huh.
choice, which like is shifting. It's shifting
Yep.
because we don't want to wait until things explode, like things catch on fire. It's like when stuff starts to smell like smoke, might be a better idea.
Right. Right. And did your childhood experiences sort of push you towards being a child therapist?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a picture of me when I'm little that I'm
Mhm.
counseling the Care Bears, and I'm in a group, and like Grumpy Bear wasn't willing to work through things. You have to be willing,
Mhm.
you know.
Yep.
And so, but like there are significant, I mean, basically my whole childhood, but significant points where I'm like if I had a therapist, things would change. I
Hmm.
actually have a chapter called hashtag get your own Stacy. And then it's like doing your inner work because I
Hmm.
had a client yell that at their dad in my waiting room. Like, get your own Stacy. Like you need therapy. Um, and
Uh-huh.
so I like didn't have the language for the profession. But
Mhm.
I knew if there was an adult in charge that could help, please, where are
Yep.
the adults in charge? So 100%.
Do you run into the situation where it's kind of hard to help the child because the real problem is a parent who doesn't see any need for them to change and they're constantly sort of re-injuring the child?
Yeah, that's the crux of family systems theory.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that most of what I see in private practice, I have such high respect for parents who bring their kids to counseling because
Mm-hmm.
it's humbling, and it's vulnerable to be like, I don't know what to do. There's outliers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I worked in community mental health, like there was a period of time when I was doing both. It was not the wisest time in my life. But in community mental health, when sometimes there's just a different demographic,
Mm-hmm.
um, like, or if they're like court ordered or state ordered to go to counseling when it's not really their option and they're like they have to.
Mm-hmm.
Families, I think, yeah, there were I can think of several very significant, like things aren't going to change like if you're
Right.
still talking to your kid like that.
Right. Well, see, I'm thinking of a situation where I won't go into the whole horrible thing that happened, where I believe my family, I don't know if we were actually court ordered to go to counseling, and this is when I was about 16,
Mm.
and or if my parents chose to. But I was told now what was going on was basically an alcoholic family system. And if you read that literature, they're describing my family to a T.
Yeah.
And so I was informed because I was the scapegoat. I was informed you are coming with us because effectively you're the problem. Well, I wasn't, I couldn't change the things going on around me. So what do you do for a child in a case like that?
Yeah. So the term for that would be like you're the identified client,
Okay.
right? Which doesn't which typically doesn't mean like the problem. It means like the
Mhm.
like a squeaky wheel.
Okay.
And so I mean like that one is really tricky. There's a thing that I'm thinking of that the mom, she was just really, really terrible to the kid, but nothing in a way that could be reported, that's like
Hmm.
evidence. And I remember telling that kid who oddly enough was depressed, I'm like,
Strange.
it's weird, I don't know.
Go figure.
And I'm like, your job is to survive the next 2 years in your house. Here's what I
Mhm.
want you to do. I want you to be involved in things that like make sure that you're not home as much. I want you to like have connections with friends that have parents that maybe you can go to. Your job is to survive. Because
Mhm.
that's the first kid that comes to mind that it was like that. It was like mom is not changing. Mom doesn't think anything's wrong with mom. And so
Right.
things are on fire in your house and you need to get out.
Right. And that's effectively what I did. I was very involved in music, and so I played, and I did it because I loved it, not specifically,
Yeah.
but it worked. It served the same purpose. And I did leave when I was 18 and pretty much been self-supporting ever since. And you know what? It worked. So
Yeah.
I think that's great advice you're giving
You're
kids.
like,
And
hey,
to just
bye.
yep, and to acknowledge up front, you know what? Some things you can't really change too much. You can only deal with it as best you can deal with it. So, do you have your reading ready? That is
Yes,
not
I
about
do.
tea,
I do.
but about
So
teeth.
yes, teeth. Yes. And it's really pretty. I'm a big fan of that. And there's a little butterfly. Um, I fought for my butterfly. I'm really into butterflies. Okay. Hashtag teeth. Family values. I hope you believe that you can still make a beautiful life for yourself, even if you lost many years of it to grief or darkness or a wound that wouldn't close. Young Pueblo. If you asked me as a child what my family valued most, the confident answer would have been teeth. As a passionate dental hygienist, my mom was very clear. No greater sin existed than not flossing before bed. A library fine was a close second. Only while checking for cavities, gum decay, braces alignment did my mom ever actually touch me. While that feels unbearably sad to write, it felt normal at the time with no comparison offered. Constantly brushing, flossing, and doing all else in my power to earn my mom's affection. Still, nothing ever hit the mark. But you better believe I tried. Memo received loud and clear. Dental health meant literally everything. My dear friend Erica pointed out once it was an actual dark comedy. So many horrible, tragic things were happening in my family, yet all the focus was on teeth. To me, it makes one curious. Is it worth it to have a child who's internally suffering but scores brownie points with the orthodontist? Who wins if the teen has zero cavities yet does not feel safe in her body? One who faithfully flosses yet is silently slipping through the cracks with depression? My mom constantly stressed the importance of a first impression smile, yet she failed to notice how disingenuous the one was on her only child's face. It also raises the question, what truly matters at the end of the day? Because if given the choice of security, support, safety, or even infrequent hugs instead, younger me would have laid out a welcome mat for a cavity party. Sure, my smile was sparkly, but when your insides don't match your outsides, it comes at a cost. Unironically, Melissa Manchester's melody Don't Cry Out Loud plays softly in the background reel of my childhood memories. The song spoke to me early on, and by kindergarten, my artificial grin was practically perfected. While multitudes of variables exist, exercises in missing the point can surface in families to obviously differing degrees. Everyone wants to present a favorable image to the world because, of course, we do. Our survival has always been dependent on following social mores, so nothing new. Charles Darwin's 1869 research is often misquoted as stating that only the strongest survive. But what he uncovered was that the species that survives is the one most adaptable to the environment, which is much more nuanced. We come by it honestly, and people are often doing the best they can at any given moment. But it is when we are desperately dying inside that the bigger problem exists. When there are gaping familial wounds and the people inside are trapped in shame, it creates a damaging disconnect.
Very nice.
Thank
So one of my biggest questions with 20, maybe more than 20 years experience, have you kind of come up with some ideas about why parents end up in these difficult places where they're making life difficult for their kids and maybe can't even see it?
Yes, for sure. Not doing their own work. But I have a theory that like if everyone, all our parents had gone to counseling, we wouldn't exist. And so I know that my mom had said that my biological father was the first guy that was nice to her and she had low self-esteem. They divorced when I was 3 months old in a shocking turn of events. But I'm like, had my mom and I learned as an 11-year-old that my mom had this major trauma, that she
Mhm.
only told me when I was 11. And like right before I was about to testify as a like, here's a bridge, I get you. And so like never talked about it past that. And I'm like, that stuff leaks out sideways,
Mhm.
and so which is why she couldn't see it when I was being abused. They're like, nope, I don't want to go there. Nope, 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 nope.
Right. Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's so true because in my experience, in a particular family I know, there were some very bad dynamics too between the parents and the children. And bit by bit, as I was talking to somebody else about this, he said, did the mother in that case have a funny uncle? And I thought, wow, was she molested as a child, which would have been in the, maybe the 50s, late 40s, something like that. And I thought that just might be what happened. That would start to explain a lot, and in this particular family too, there were also the issues of the mother, like yours, having very low self-esteem, just really looking down on herself. And then she married somebody who was probably similar to you. First guy who was nice to her, took an interest in her. She didn't think anybody else would. And so she put up with garbage for the whole marriage. And that just complicated all the family issues. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And what would you say is like one of the biggest things that people need to do to cope with childhood issues?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously I'm a big fan of counseling, but I always say that my job is to help prevent less hurting adults,
Mhm.
because I do believe in the work that we do as child and adolescent therapists, that like we're hopefully changing things generationally. And so I
Mhm.
also think it's never too late to start doing work. I mean, even if you can't make it to like a therapist, there's just so much research out there. There's so much to read. There's so much to read. There are like there's so many options available to like learn more, do more. I believe every therapist should be doing their work in therapy at some point in their journey, not all the time.
Mhm.
And so I would say like, yeah, look at it, because oftentimes if there's unresolved trauma, somebody, like if you were 7 and then when your kid is 7, oftentimes that there's a rub there, because
Mhm.
there's just so many ways that can be activating.
Well, oh my gosh, I see that so much in my own life that there were so many things that I just took for granted. And I think kids do take for granted their life is all they know. They don't have that broader experience. And so as my kids started to get older, I thought back to some of the things that were said and done in our home. And I was always told, well, we're a perfectly normal family. The problem is you're a teenager, and teenagers are always problematic. Well, my kids weren't as teenagers. They were good kids. Every once in a while, one of the boys would try and push boundaries, but you know what? Mostly they were 99.5% really good kids. And I have 9, so that's saying a
You
lot.
have 9
I
kids?
do. I do. And I can't remember a single one of them who went through terrible teenage years. I mean, because they didn't, and every kid has their
They're
issues, just like,
humans. Yeah.
right, right. We all have our failures, but for the most part, their teenage years were
Wow.
wonderful. And so I forgot the question, but
Well, like
I
what
guess
about
my
being
point.
activated when your
Right.
kid's that
My
age?
point was that as I started seeing how I felt about my kids and treated them at each age, I started going, wow, that was really messed up. I would never do or say that to my child. And that's when I really started understanding that there were a lot of issues, that we really weren't quite the normal family I was told we were.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, and that it can be hard to be like, wait a minute, I was that innocent, or like my needs didn't get met and theirs are like there can be really like damaging like awareness, but
mhm.
that can lead to healing, but that's hard.
I think to me it was healing because after years of, and even well into my adulthood, constantly being told, I mean, even today, if I went to a family event, I would be told I'm the problem, which is why I don't go. Like, you know what?
Hard
I'll,
pass then. Bye. Enjoy your potluck.
right, have fun. But I finally came to a place of just saying this wasn't normal, but yes, it was healing because I finally realized I'm not the problem, because I'm not a parent who says and does things like that to my kids, even if they have a bad day. I'm not going to say things like that to them. Um, just as one example, I can remember my mother getting angry and just screaming and yelling, "This is what having kids does to you." And I was like, that's a horrible message to give to your kids. I would never say that to my kids, no matter how rough a day we had. And I do have one or two with ADHD. We're possibly on the autism spectrum. And we did have some very, very, very rough days. for about a year and a half in particular. And you know what? I still never would have said that
No,
because,
because who says that?
right, because you're the parent. You need to love and take care of these children. So, do you do a lot of focus on forgiveness?
No.
Okay.
I do. If there is something on forgiveness, like I wrote a little bit about it. I think apologizing to your kids when necessary
Mhm,
is is pretty crucial. That can change the dynamic.
mhm,
Well, I think that could be really helpful, that you're admitting like your humanity to a kid. I know I was never apologized to, and I should have been.
mhm,
And so I think that's important. But like in regards to like abuse and neglect,
mhm,
they've sort of in the past 2 decades sort of kind of removed that as a stage,
mhm.
because they're like it's not necessary in order to heal, because some things like they just are. They don't require your. Is that what you mean?
Well, I was thinking more strictly the child forgiving the parent.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we're on the same page. Yeah, that it's like I mean I think that it can be a stage that is like helpful, but I
Mhm.
don't think it's necessary in order to heal, to have that
Okay,
forgiveness.
that's interesting. I think you're the first person I've heard say that.
Hmm.
But I guess to me, I think understanding was really crucial to kind of
Sure.
look at the backgrounds of, and not just parents, not just, I think this is true for anyone who hurts us, that if we start to understand their past issues and what they've been through a lot of times, even if what they're doing is still wrong, it becomes understandable. And therefore, to me, that's forgiveness.
Yeah, I mean, there's the current line in the like in the field is like, because it used to just be they did the best with what they had, but
Mhm,
like these days, like it's been added the caveat of, but they could have done better.
right.
And so, like, instead of being like, I have awareness of. I mean, my mom didn't have a guide. She didn't have those
Mhm,
things, but also there were choices that were made that negatively impacted my entire life. So she could have done better. And so it's like
right.
holding the nuance of that.
Yes, and finding the balance and just trying to move forward. So, do you have another book planned? And I wanted to ask too, is this the first book you ever wrote?
Yes, it's my first book.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that came out in April and May. I have had thoughts like swirling, but I really want this one to be in a lot of hands.
Hmm.
So I'm telling myself like calm down, and like slow your roll, because I think that my book could be really beneficial to a lot of
Hmm.
people. That's my hope. And so I really want it to be in as many hands as possible. And fun fact, in this moment, it is being translated in Korean. Because I don't know, somebody from South Korea stumbled across my book because it's the kind of
Hmm.
reading they like,
Hmm.
and like they wrote to my publisher, and they're like, and to me, and they're like, have the Korean rights been sold yet? I'm like, what? And so I signed for it to be translated in Korea. And so
That's exciting.
I know. You want to hear a fun fact?
Yeah,
So I'm really purple, as you can tell. It's like
I
it's
noticed.
yeah, it's part of my shtick.
Now,
It's
just before you launch into the story, in your author photo you sent, was your hair a little bit purple too?
no,
Oh, okay. I was
no.
seeing
I
things.
had a purple. I had a purple.
That might be what I
A
saw.
headscarf. Yeah, I had a purple headscarf. But I have said like one day I'll go purple, but so in the
Mhm,
future. But so I like it's part of my signature. And
mhm,
so the Korean publisher said, yeah, so you're also signing that we're gonna change the cover. And I was like, okay. I was like, is it possible that it could stay purple? Because it's like kind of my thing. And he said,
mhm.
actually, And do you know this? In like Korean literature, purple is considered a somber color and
Okay.
it's associated with grief. And so he was like, it would not do well in the market with your demographic. And he's like, is it a deal breaker? And I'm like, it's not a deal breaker. I respect your culture. You do you.
Hmm.
I was like, but people are gonna ask. It's the first thing they're gonna ask me, like, why is it
Right.
not purple? So that was
Yeah.
a fun fact to learn.
That is interesting. There actually is a book. I think I got it in downloadable form. I don't know if it's in print, just download, but it's all about colors. And because I write fiction, it's about the use of colors in a story.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because it goes into all the different symbolisms of these various colors and why you might want to sprinkle blue throughout a scene and what effect that's going to have
Huh.
on a reader. And it's a very subtle thing that you just mentioned the
Interesting.
blue curtains or the blue sheets and the blue dress, and it's going to create moods. And the reader probably isn't even going to realize,
Not at all.
but they did warn, they went into the symbolism in other cultures too and said, you do need to be aware. This is maybe more what the Western mind will pick up and associate. But in Asia, in China, in different cultures, they'll pick up something else from that, or they may. So that is
Okay. No,
interesting.
that's interesting. Like to drop those hints and then like it creates
Hmm.
a different feeling within the reader.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
So were you thinking of writing another book, or for now just promoting
One
this?
day, yes. One day I have a apparently I have a lot to say. I sort of thought that like I had given it all and then but I've been on a bunch of podcasts. I'm like, oh, I have more things to say.
You
It's
know what? I think the more we write, the more we have to say,
yeah.
because at one point it's like, well, I want to write another book, but I don't have any ideas. And now I've got probably about a dozen in progress because I have, the more I write, the more ideas I have. So that's
Yeah, like it's like swirling.
right. So where can people find you online?
So my publisher's made a website called Author Stacy Schaffer. There's lots of ways to misspell my name, so I'm guessing it'll be in the show notes.
Yes.
Author Stacy Schaffer. I'm on
Is that
Instagram.
.com?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram as Hope Restored. Because I used to once upon a time I wanted that to be the name of my counseling practice, but Stacy Schaffer Counseling was deemed as catchy. So
Okay.
but the author stacyschaffer.com, you can read a little bit about my book. You can there's the links to like it's on Amazon, Spotify, Audible, Barnes and Noble, online. And there's also a contact me form if you wanted to reach out to me directly.
All right. So you can find me at booksandbrews.net, where we also have the podcast. This is the YouTube version of the program. You can find my books and everything else I do online, which is a lot, at lauravosica.com. You can find our sponsor at gabrielshornpress.com, and you can find all our farm animals at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com, including the two rams who I finally separated from the ewes because I've got to stop these ewes being pregnant all the time because some of them have to go to the slaughterhouse. And we finally got the rams separated. They were in their own field for 2 days. Today they were magically back with all the ewes, and I have no idea how they got through or over that fence, but there they were. So you can see them at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com. Our next interview on Books and Brews Light coming up is Mark Liebman. He writes contemporary fiction, including about counterterrorism as the themes of his fiction. And coming up on our full podcast, we have Ashley Fontaine and Andrea Emmis, whose book Eternal Beauty is a psychological horror thriller. I'm in the process of reading it now, and it is very interesting. So I will put this out to all the authors listening, hopefully many. We are looking for authors with Christmassy themes for our December podcasts, or even any just snowy wintry themes. So I guess The Shining might be appropriate. I don't know. It's not very Christmassy, is it? Actually, our last winter in Duluth, we had about 15 feet of snow, so I can really appreciate The Shining now. And we are also hoping to find an author of medieval fiction, ideally who lives close enough or is willing to travel to Knoxville, because we have a really neat place that we want to film a program about medieval fiction. So if that's you, contact us. If that's not you, leave a comment, give us a like, share, subscribe. And thank you, Stacy, for being on.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.